Here, come on up.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA. What am I here for? Over in Northeast LA, we have a problem. The State Route 710 has been holding meetings for the proposed EIR, except for one thing. Nobody in City Hall seems to know who got the notice of preparation and will be attending the agency scoping meeting next week. DOT says, we don't have it. Department of Public Works says, we don't have it, but it's going to be held next week on the 14th. There will be a scoping meeting for State Route 710 North Extension, gap closure, whatever you want to call it. So we're quite concerned in Northeast LA as to what the city is doing, because we went through a 3-year process on a, quotes, technical feasibility study where they said in writing it was Bureau of Engineering. But then at the end of it, Bureau of Engineering says it's really not ours, it belongs to DOT. But DOT didn't know about it, hadn't attended any of the meetings. Bureau of Engineering hadn't attended any of the meetings, and only the citizens were there. So we're kind of confused and bewildered, and we're quite concerned because this is real now. They have an EIR in preparation. They want to build a tunnel. They haven't quite figured out where, and the project definition is so poor that it's something to improve mobility and reduce congestion somewhere in Northeast LA. So we don't know what's going on, and we're just trying to find out who's responsible for this. And since it's transportation, came to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Mr. Fisher, take a meeting with him in the back and help him and take it to the direction that helps satisfy his question on that. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Okay, we're still waiting for a third member, as I'd like to do, and when he shows up, we'll ask him to support us on item number 1 and item number 2. There are no cards on that. And item number 1 is, Marie?
Item number 1 is a DOT report relative to the renewal of temporary PPD number 105, and item 2 is the DOT report relative to the renewal of temporary PPD number 144.
Okay, and the one that is in the 5th, Mr. Carets' district. Do you want approval on that?
Yes.
Okay, so moved. Two of us, when Mr. Alarcon shows up, we'll make it unanimous, assuming he has no issue with it. And the same for number 2, which is the 12th CD. Mr. Carets?
Yes.
Okay, so it's unanimous on items 1 and 2. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is a CAO report relative to the sale of the city off-street parking lot number 692.
And the request is to continue this item, but we do have a card on it, Dr. Clyde Williams, before we take action. Dr. Williams, item number 3.
It's in the hallway, sir. You want to officiate?
Well, yeah, if he wants to, otherwise. Dr. Williams, it's item number 3, and it was suggested to continue this item, but you did fill out a card. So if you'd like to speak on item number 3, which is the CAO report, no, it says regular on you scratched out and then you put regular.
I thought it was 3.
Well, all I can say is you got regular and that you got 3. If you don't want to talk on it, we can scratch it.
Okay, now I have to change it back. Okay. 1, 2.
Well, item number 3 is CAO report relative to the sale of city off-street parking lot 692 per CD10's request, but we're
Vermont,
continuing
yeah.
that item.
As part of the Sierra Club, we're looking at multi-mode low builds related to the SR 710, but we've been looking at it as Northeast LA being an example. One of the things that we find is that parking is a driver for commuters. If there's convenient parking and a dash bus nearby or an MTA bus nearby, They'll drive in, park all day, and then use, quotes, local bus systems. So we're quite concerned about any sale of a piece of property at $100 a square foot. This seems like a giveaway. So in relationship to the others, and then we looked at, the revenue generation from it is terrible. $29,000 a year, that's hardly worth the paperwork. So we're quite concerned regarding an overall parking policy for downtown LA, especially reflecting any commuter uses of all-day parking at, quotes, reasonable rates. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate your comments, and as we mentioned, with your support, Mr. Carets will continue item number 3.
Sure.
Okay. Item number 4, could we read that?
Item number 4 is the city attorney report and ordinance adding section 5.10 to chapter 4 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to prohibit harassment of bicyclists.
On this note, I want to go on the record and talk about what this is. On November 10th, 2010, the Los Angeles City Council requested the city attorney to draft an ordinance related to the creation of civil cause of action for bicyclists who are harassed because of their status as cyclists, and provide for an award of damages in an amount not less than $1,000 attorney fees and punitive damage. Specifically, this ordinance would add section 45.96.02 to the LAMC and prohibit the following activities. 1, physically assault or attempt to physically assault a bicyclist because in whole or part of the bicyclist status as a bicyclist. B, threaten to physically injure a bicyclist because in whole or in part the bicyclist status as a bicyclist. And 3, to intentionally injure, attempt to injure, or threaten to physically injure, either by words, vehicle, or other object, a bicyclist because in whole or in part the bicyclist status as a bicyclist. And D, intentionally distract or attempt to distract a bicyclist because in whole or in part of the bicyclist status as a bicyclist. The ordinance would also add a new LAMC section 45.96.03 that provides that, 1, any grieved person may enforce the provisions of this article by means of a civil lawsuit. Any person who violates the provisions of this article shall be liable for actual damages with regard to each and every such violation, and such additional amount as may be determined by a jury or a court sitting without a jury, up to 3 times the amount of the actual damages, or 1,000, whatever is greater, as well as a reasonable attorney's fee and cost of litigation. In addition, a jury or court may award punitive damages when warranted. And I have a series of questions, and we have a lot of public comment cards, but I'd like staff to come up and just explain to us where we're at on this, and then we'll take the public comment cards afterwards so that the public understands exactly where we're at as a group. And we have 3 cards for folks who want to speak on this item when we do it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Deputy City Attorney Judith Reel. As you read, Council Member, we prepared the draft ordinance that would create a civil cause of action for people who harass bicyclists in the City of LA because of their status as bicyclists. I would like to bring up one technical point. This ordinance would go in a section of the municipal code that creates a lot of civil causes of actions for discriminatory behavior. And the language about the remedies and how they are described is in the draft ordinance before you is identical to the remedies section in all of those other ordinances. And I believe it has the meaning that was intended. However, I believe upon rereading it and in discussions with a gentleman who I believe submitted a public speaker card, I believe that it's also capable of a different interpretation, and that's an ambiguity that does not serve the public nor the city. So I would not be opposed at all to a motion to request my office to clarify the damages provision so that it would clearly state that a violator would be liable for actual damages, to clarify the basis on which a jury could award or a judge could award treble damages, to clarify that in no case would a violator have to pay less for damages than $1,000, and that in addition to that, a violator would be liable for attorney's fees and cost of litigation and punitive damages if found to be warranted by a judge or jury.
Okay, we'll hold that for our action moment when we go into that, but stay here for a couple of questions before we go to public comment. But we'd appreciate you bringing that back so that we can vote. We've had quite a bit of discussion on this item, and I'm very excited to see the ordinance coming forward. Cyclists are among the most vulnerable road users out there in our streets. So the more we can do to protect them, and in this case, provide them with tools to seek recourse if they're injured or harassed, the better. City Attorney could give us a brief presentation, and here are the questions. So by allowing for the recovery of attorney's fees, we're really empowering cyclists to seek proper compensation for damages. Is that correct?
That is correct.
2, because unless the damages are severe, it's really unlikely that an attorney would take up a case today. Is that correct?
Without an attorney's fee provision, that is correct.
Mm-hmm. And unless there's a severe injury, it's really unlikely that there will be any criminal penalties or police report for that matter.
That is what was testified to by public speakers. I personally, however, wouldn't have knowledge of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. Also, the threshold of evidence is lower on a civil side versus criminal. A preponderance of evidence as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. Is that right?
That is correct.
And 2 more, and any other advantage, another advantage is that a police report wouldn't be necessary either. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no particular item of proof that would be required.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, is the city exposing itself to any liability in enacting this proposed ordinance?
No.
Well, I want to give a big thank you to Judy Reel for putting this together and what you're doing. Now, before Mr. Carets, unless he wants to comment now, we'll take public comment.
I just have one really
Please
quick
do.
technical
Sure.
question. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not sure why the wording status as a bicyclist keeps coming up. It's not how I would have described it. So what does it actually mean?
Well, it means that it is creating a cause of action for activity such as distractions or physical assaults or threats that are directed to an individual because they are riding a bicycle. For example, we needed to be careful and not make this overbroad. There may be times when it would be, in fact, unfortunately, lawful to intentionally injure a bicyclist. If you were driving a car and a child darted out in the road, and you had a choice, unfortunately, between hitting the child or clipping the rear tire of a bicyclist, you may very well lawfully choose to injure the bicyclist. You would not be liable under this ordinance because you were injuring the bicyclist in order to prevent harm, a greater harm to someone else. You weren't injuring the bicyclist because they were a bicyclist. So, the because of the status of in whole or in part is also language that is used, I believe, in the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination against people on the basis of race, sex, religion. It also uses that you can't take action against someone because in whole or in part of their status as. So this is consistent with that law.
Okay, and just in general, I would say we heard a lot of testimony before about how people are harassed and mistreated on bicycles, and I know Mr. Rosendale and myself were both very concerned and found that very compelling. So I'm excited to have this come back to us and have this become law shortly and protect the cyclists in the city of LA.
Thank you, Mr. Carets. And the 3 public comment cards, Ross Hurst, Jay Slater, and Jeff Jacobberger. Mr. Hurst, you're up first.
Thank you. Good afternoon. On behalf of myself as a cyclist, on behalf of myself as a cyclist who bikes, as a father with his kids, and on behalf of myself as an attorney who's looking out for other road users namely cyclists, who are all too often marginalized rather than encouraged, I say thank you. I say thank you for moving this forward. I support this wholeheartedly. I do have, and the letter that City Attorney Judith Reel referenced was a letter that I submitted to your staff just earlier today, and I apologize for the delay. But I do think that Section 459603B needs to be clarified. We need it clear what damages are mandatory by this section, which I think should be all of them included in subsection B, and which ones are discretionary. As it reads now, attorneys are fairly crafty folk. I could think of a whole bunch of reasons why the only thing that a victim would be entitled to by this section is actual damages. And if that's the case, then that's status quo. That means I'm not going to be able to take the case that has the small damages. So without those treble damages, without the $1,000 minimum damages, without the possibility of recovering my attorney's fees, I just can't take the case. I don't think anybody would be able to afford to take that case. So we need those in there to be mandatory, and that's the nature of my letter that Ms. Reel discussed previously. The only other comment I'd like to add is on Section D, which reads, the remedies provided by the provisions of this article are in addition to the other remedies provided by law. I would just like clarification that that does not prohibit the city attorney or district attorney from choosing to pursue a criminal action if they so choose. And if the city attorney could just confirm that, that'd be great.
Appreciate that. Stay there for a second before the other two comments. Judy, do you want to respond to this since you brought it up first, and he did send a letter this morning, and I consider this part of the discussion here in the committee?
Yes, I believe that the language is sufficiently clear that it's in addition to all other remedies, and it's creating a civil cause of action, so that I don't think it could plausibly be interpreted to in any way prevent the city or district attorney or anyone else from taking action, which we could take now against people because of criminal acts.
And how do you feel about that comment, Ross?
It's fairly clearly stated there. In D, I just don't understand all other remedies provided by law. I'm not sure a criminal action is necessarily a remedy, but with the city attorney's statement today, I'm satisfied by that.
Are you comfortable now, too?
Yes.
Okay, fine. And if there's any other fine print you need to do, please get with the city attorney prior to coming before council. Very good. Appreciate that very much. Sir.
Thanks. Jeff Jacobberger. My concern is that the ordinance doesn't go far enough. What happens most frequently is that I'm riding my bike down the street, somebody's very close behind me, laying on the horn, screaming at me. They would say, they're not attempting to injure me. They're not attempting to distract me. They're attempting to get my attention and to get me off the road and onto the sidewalk where I belong. But what they are trying to do, what they're actually doing, is trying to intimidate or harass me from exercising my lawful right to ride my bicycle down the street. And nothing in this ordinance actually seems like it's directly aimed at the conduct that you're trying to prohibit, and that somebody will be able to go into a courtroom and give, what they're trying to do is get my attention, not distract me. They're not trying to injure me. They're trying to force me off the road under some misguided attempt that they're protecting me from injury. At least that's what they'll be able to say. And so I think in the most common circumstance, this doesn't really go at the conduct that you're trying to address. And I had a brief discussion with the city attorney who sort of had some free speech issues about intimidation. There's a difference between laying on your horn to warn me of something. I mean, every driver is entitled to use their horn to warn people. But I think a jury or a judge is very easy, can very capably distinguish between the toot on the horn to warn somebody and the aggressive use of the horn designed to intimidate. And I just don't think, quite honestly, this goes far enough, and it requires an attempt to go into the intent of the motorist in a way that doesn't seem necessary to me. Thank you.
Please, stay there.
Yeah.
And I think it could sort of cross over, too, because their intent may be just to force you off the road and get you onto the sidewalk, but that could actually distract you and injure you, even if that isn't their intent. Their intent is just to get you out of the way. Now, there are some people that really hate cyclists, and they do some things that would be likely to injure you, and clearly for that purpose. But other folks that may scare the heck out of you and cause an accident, even if it wasn't intentional. I think that's what we're trying to get at with this, and we may have missed, as you pointed out.
And if I might, I think in the scenario that the gentleman described, that could very easily fall into intentionally distract or attempt to distract a person because of their status as a bicyclist. Anytime a mental state, a frame of mind, is part of the elements that have to be proved, as in any kind of discrimination case, you're always going to encounter the situation that was raised, is that a defendant may come up with an excuse that frankly isn't plausible, and it really goes to a matter of proof. It's up to for the attorney and the jury and the judge to assess, what the motives were, but you have difficulty proving state of mind, but it is essential to have state of mind as an element, because otherwise, again, people have to be able to have the right to intentionally distract a bicyclist. If you're in a big truck and you can see that there's a very dangerous condition down the road that the bicyclist can't see, we can't prohibit, we wouldn't want to prohibit that person from honking their horn and saying, get off the road. So the frame of mind, it has to sort of necessarily be a part of the elements of the cause of action.
Is there no way to phrase it that you can't try to force a bicyclist off the road except for purposes of public safety? Because that is what often happens. They don't like the fact that there's a cyclist in front of them that's going slower than they are, and they really honk their horn, loud and long and scare the heck out of them and force them off the road, come up pretty close to them.
Well, it's certainly something we could look into and perhaps consider adding it as an E, and that's something we can look into and get back to you on.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because otherwise I think we are missing a good portion of what we're all getting at.
Thank you.
You're up, Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jay Slater. I'm the chairman of the Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee. First, thank you to the committee for its hard work in bringing this forward and getting it to where it is. I would second everything that Jeff has said, but what troubles me the most in here is there's an awful lot of room in here for interpretation of what represents harassment and how it would be enforced. If it's just me riding my bike and I am forced off the road by a car who is breaking the DMV laws, I have the same right to that lane that car has under the laws of the Department of Motor Vehicles. We've discussed this, obviously, over and over and over again. I go to court and file a suit. I have no real witnesses, but I say that this guy, forgive me for using you as an example, Councilman, but Mr. Carets ran me off the road. I drove up into the sidewalk. I fell. But what proof do I have? There is nothing in this ordinance that I can see that calls for the police to take a report or to be involved. And I don't know, and it troubles me a great deal, as to whether or not this ordinance will be part of the Los Angeles Police Department training program, which is currently underway, and which has had an enormous effect, as we've heard previously from the department itself and from cyclists all over town, and we've heard in the city council chambers that that training process that they're going through has reached probably 90% of the officers, and it has definitely made a difference. But now we have something new for the police to watch for, and that is harassment of cyclists. And it goes way beyond being honked at. People get things thrown at them. We have the incident in Mandeville, which was probably the worst case of harassment ever that I know about. And it continues with people spitting at us and throwing things and using their vehicles as weapons. And I don't see anything in here. As much as I support this going forward, I would like to see more teeth here. I would like to see something here that says I can take myself, if I'm physically able to go directly to a police department or to flag down an officer and file a report with him on the spot and so that I know that my report has been made. And if I'm chopped up, if I've got road rash, if my bicycle is broken, whatever, I have some means to take to a court in a lawsuit as a proof that something happened, because then it's, other than that, it's he said, she said.
Judy?
Yes, thank you. What generated this is the fact that there are already laws on the books that prohibit throwing things at bicyclists or honking your horn unnecessarily at them or assaulting them, attempting to injure them are already violations of the law. And the frustration, I believe, that bicyclists expressed is that those were not sufficient. Those weren't offering enough meaningful protection. So the whole point of this ordinance was not to require any special reports or put up any unusually high hurdles. Of course, if you're a plaintiff and you've been injured and you want to sue, yeah, it would behoove you to get a police report, just as it would if you're in a car accident. That might very well help you. This ordinance doesn't preclude that. It simply doesn't require it.
What I'd like to do is, we want to move forward, and like you said, with the LAPD, obviously, the sooner we have a law in place, the quicker we can do an education process with them, and I got to say hats off to Charlie Beck. Absolutely. What I would like to do, the three of you, we're all compelling in your comments, that if you can get with Judy Reel between now and council action, and work it out so that everybody feels it's strong enough, then we could pass it out of this committee today, two of us, and continue it to the council floor itself, unless you would be more comfortable bringing it back here or not.
Council member, I'm comfortable giving you the best legal advice and service I can, and I'm comfortable if you were to make a motion today requesting my office to clarify the damages portion of the ordinance. I'm comfortable with a motion today asking us to consider adding to the ordinance a cause of action for forcing or attempting someone to force a bicycle off the road for purposes unrelated to public safety. And I'm comfortable, not speaking for my office, coming back directly to council with such an ordinance. And if we don't, for example, believe that it would be lawful to include the element about forcing somebody off the road, we can certainly include that in the transmittal report. I'm happy to have input from people, but I'm not comfortable delegating our authority to give you the best advice. So I'm happy if these gentlemen want to email me. I'm not comfortable with having to work it out with them because I, with all due respect, I think this is council's decision.
I agree with you on that, and we put it out there for the record. So I will make the motion on the two elements that Ms. Reel just presented to us. Have a second?
Second.
Okay, and so that will be where we will take it with your motions to the council floor. And, yeah, go ahead.
One quick question. Can we at some point, and I don't know honestly if it belongs in the ordinance itself or not, have some statement that it will be forwarded to Chief Beck and Sergeant Krumer, who's our liaison person through BAC, to the LAPD, so that they are aware that this ordinance exists and
Sure.
it becomes part of their
Absolutely.
training?
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, great. We've made great progress on this, and this will be the first in the nation, I might add. And I appreciate the three public comments, and I appreciate City Attorney suggesting motions that would move it forward on that. So since this is the meeting, we're going to do it on what day would we have our next the council meeting, the 18th?
Clerk.
The next council meeting is scheduled for the 18th. If you want to move forward at this time, you can move forward with a request for the city attorney to draft the new ordinance with the requested amendments and with the direction for LAPD to incorporate this in their training.
Exactly.
Okay.
So moved. Second. Great. Appreciate very much, Judy, your work on this. You've done a great job. And I think we're going to be breaking new ground by this in the nation, and it'll become a model for the rest of the country to go forward with this issue. Thank you very much for that. Next item.
Item number 5 is a Rosendale Carets motion instructing DOT to report relative to the revenue enhancement opportunities from parking enforcement activities.
We have a Dr. Clyde Williams on this one. Are you up for it again, Doctor? Yeah. You got a card pulled on it.
Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA. We're quite interested in this particular one because one of the things that we anticipate is that the price of parking should or will go up in the downtown area. Therefore, penalties have to go up in order to have better supervision of the parking requirements. One of the things that we would suggest, though, is think about having limited parking. That is, 1 to 3 hours free. And then anyone staying more than 3 hours has to pay a premium. We've always looked at $10 to $15 per car space per day would be a reasonable sum and would generate enough money to perhaps pay for the administration of the parking area and the enforcement of the parking fines. So we look at penalties as being a related item to the actual fee for parking, and in some cases, free parking for retail use. So please give them what they can get. And we have quite a few parking problems out in El Sereno, especially at fire plugs and all-day parking, because they come in, commuters come in, stop, park all day, and take the bus into town. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We do have a letter here, and do we have spokespeople on that one from Revenue Enhancement Points from Local 721, as well, of course, we have city staff here to report on it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. Amir Sadati, Interim General Manager. I'm joined with Chief Price and Deputy Chief Mata. And we appreciate the opportunity to be before you. I don't see, and I wish the 3 officers were here. I don't see them in the audience. I don't see anybody from the union here, but the message is very clear, and I hope that they're listening, because I think it's, it's very important for us in these difficult times to make sure that we enhance our operations as much as we can. So we've looked at the letter that was provided to us, and thank you to the city clerk giving us a copy of that. And, there's a lot of, obviously, challenges when an operation that big and complex within a second largest city in the nation. So and we'll be happy to really, discuss these things, but a lot of this falls into the budget and the budget questions and, more of a budgetary nature. But I could tell you that we have a very fair and transparent process. We began a joint labor management committee. A JLMC has been formed. I know that in the past, maybe recent past, we have not had as many meetings, and I think that kind of falls on both of our responsibilities. But I have directed the chief, and he has stepped up and will be participating in getting the JLMC issues back up and running. And really, that's the grounds where a lot of some of the dissatisfaction that a few of the officers had talked about. That's, I think, the arena where we can talk about productivity enhancements. How do we improve absenteeism? How do we improve worker safety? What are some of the challenges? And we did do that, council member, when we went through the meter technologies, when we went through the handhelds. We went through that process and got the officers involved and help us decide what products to use, what are their challenges each day, what are the things that they do. And some of the things that was in the letter has actually been already implemented, signage and things where our handhelds can automatically enter where street signs are missing or we have damaged equipment. And we've had challenges, and I know that the council has directed the CAO and the department to come back and talk about the general revenue trends and why has revenue dropped in past years and so forth. So we're working with that report to come back. So I think in general we're here to listen, and again we have an open and fair process, council members, and we really want to make sure that all of our officers, not just the 3, but all of them understand that, we're in this difficult crunch, and we all have a job to do, and their job is very difficult. And I always, said this many times, that they're our heroes. A few days ago in that cold, stormy night, our officers were out there directing traffic. During the Academy Awards, during 110-degree weather, they're out there. They're out there doing their jobs. It's a difficult job. And that's what we're saying. If there are things that we can work to make improvements, we have that. We have a very participatory style, and we we're open to all
Let me
that.
then quickly, because I appreciate what you said, and I certainly appreciate your officers, especially the other day when we had the marathon on Venice Boulevard, and how guys and ladies really got involved in getting those cars out of the way so we didn't have to tow them. But let me, for the record, just put this out here, okay, and get your response. This February 23rd letter that did come in from Local 721, in part said the following: fill the roughly 40 officer vacancies with full-time and not part-time officers. The proposal to hire part-time traffic officers is currently being considered by the mayor's office in the preparation for the mayor's new fiscal 11-12 budget and has not yet been discussed publicly. Remove boss street cleaners from furloughs to reduce the number of canceled street cleaning activities, which restrict the ability of traffic officers to issue traffic citations. Change posted street cleaning sign with no parking signs to maximize citation issuance. Remove traffic, paint, and sign poster employees from furloughs to maximize citation issuances. Fill parking meter technician positions to increase efficiency in maintaining and replacing meters to increase parking citation revenues. Address low morale at DOT's traffic enforcement section to reduce an environment of hostility, intimidation, and unprofessionalism. Reinstate overtime money for traffic officers to allow them to focus solely on citation issuance. Examine bringing the ticket processing function in-house and emphasize injury prevention to reduce the high number of IODs injured on duty. Most of these issues identified in the letter have been and continue to be discussed and analyzed by the CAO. But for the record, why has LADOT not tried to fill the traffic officer vacancies?
In an environment, sir, with almost $63 million shortfall and 350, maybe 400 million next year, I don't have the salaries. The salaries need to be in our account. And the idea of the part-time traffic officers is being considered by the CA and the mayor's office. And again, in a budgetary perspective, when that's before you, you can all make a decision about that.
In fact, there is the second question, which pretty well is what you just said. Is the department considering hiring part-time traffic officers? That'll be part of the mayor's budget proposal. Or
I think some options will be before you, and as elected bodies, you can make that policy decision.
Right.
We, as I think many of you have heard, that pension costs continue to be a challenge for us. And what the department has done is just looked at other options before we actually go ahead and increase that. But that is one of the main factors why some of our revenue is down. We're down 45 vacancies.
And then also, what would be necessary to change posted street cleaning signs with no parking signs, and what would be the estimated cost to do so?
At this time, I don't have the numbers, sir, so if that's something we can come back to you, we can again discuss all of that in the budget.
Sure. How can citations, how many citations are dismissed annually due to defaced or missing parking signs?
Again, I don't have that information handy.
Get back to us on that. And then, what is the department doing to address the morale issues identified in the letter?
I think I'm going to let the chief talk on that one.
Please, Chief.
Yes, sir, council member. One thing that we're in the process of doing is we're working with Maggie Whalen and personnel and our department assistant general manager in charge of budget and administration to try to determine if we can find some funding to provide some advanced training on interpersonal skills and relationships, how to deliver constructive criticism, how to coach, and how to counsel. And we've been working with a firm from the East Coast that has a lot of experience in working with parking enforcement type groups. If we're able to obtain the funding, then we intend to send about 25 of our most recently appointed supervisors who did not have that opportunity to receive that advanced training because of the budgetary situation when they were promoted. We certainly think that that'll go a long way with, at least providing our supervisors with the skills necessary to deal with some very sticky, as Amir said, difficult times. We are in an operations that requires precision, that requires, accountability, and that requires that our folks, be reliable and be responsive. And sometimes in getting that done, you get a little friction. but there's no need for us to, intimidate anyone or harass anyone to get them to do their job, because we have processes in place to deal with folks that don't do that. Another thing that we're doing is that we reactivated our social clubs within the area so that the officers themselves can plan events that will help lift their morale and activities that lend to higher morale. We're also making an effort to get additional staff, because that may be one of the drivers which causing a lot of the low morale. With the high vacancy rate that we have, it's very difficult to grant unscheduled time off. As you're aware, traffic officers don't take furloughs, but it would make no sense to exempt them from furloughs and then grant them additional time off. You're defeating the purpose of exempting them from furloughs. But if we're able to overcome that challenge of getting additional staff, I truly believe that that's going to resolve a lot of the issues, because we can be a little bit more flexible. And we're going to encourage our folks to, be more flexible and to be, more patient and to be receptive and approachable when employees have issues or ideas. We've had a good relationship for most of our existence, but this is a different time, a difficult time, and a time that we've never faced before. And it's going to take adjustments on the part of the supervisors and management, as well as the rank and file workforce. But we're committed to improving the working conditions. We're committed to improving the working relationship. And we're willing to sit down at a table with SEIU, with traffic officers, or any other stakeholder, and engage in a healthy dialogue that leads to a resolution of some of these issues.
Appreciate that very much. Just two more quick questions. What is being done to emphasize injury prevention for traffic officers?
Well, sir, we have a safe subcommittee that's a part of our JLMC process that deals specifically with safety. And we've got a lot of great recommendations out of that committee when it is met. We recently improved their safety vests, and they played a large role in that process in selecting the new safety vest. Naturally, it had to conform with federal standards, but we did get a new safety vest, and they wear the reflective vest when they're directing traffic. They also came up with the idea of why don't we provide in-service training to individuals that are involved in accidents that could have been prevented. And so as a result of that, we established an accident review board similar to LAPD's, and when accidents are determined to be preventable, the employees are sent back through training to make sure that, they pick up the skills necessary not to get harmed out there. We've also conducted a study with members of the city personnel staff on how to properly use our handheld ticket writer device so that you can avoid repetitive injuries. We've also studied how to enter and exit the vehicle without getting injured, how to step up on curbs without getting injured. And we've produced a number of safety bulletins which have been provided to the staff as a whole. So I think not only as the Bureau, but the department is making commitment, giving its resources to improve the safety of our officers. And one thing I'm particularly proud of is to report to my boss that since 2003, we've reduced assaults on traffic officers by 75%. And that was an enormous undertaking that involved both management and labor to bring that about. But that was brought about through education, through training, and again, through the issuance of pepper spray, which most non-sworn organizations don't issue, but we do because we know that they have a tough job out there. And we try to protect them in many ways as we can. But we have to remember that, safety starts with the individual. And if you don't execute the training that you've been given, you are going to be prone to injury. But, we're working on that also, Councilman.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your eloquence on it, too. And my last question is, when was the last time the department examined bringing the ticket processing function in-house? How long has the city contracted out this function?
I believe the last time was approximately 2007, if I'm not mistaken. There's been a task force, and at the time, council member, we brought all of the city families together, ITA, General Services, Personnel, DOT, CLA, CAO, and at that time, obviously it was a different time, and the challenge was ITA said, we need unlimited resources, give us unlimited funds, and we'll try to figure out a system to do it, because the system is a proprietary system. There's no off-the-shelf type. Since then, there's been changes with, obviously, the ITA. We went back and revisited and asked ITA again, and since then, ITA has lost 40% of their staffing. Many departments have been going through ERIP and deletions, and cities getting shrinking and smaller. So this is a $140 million operation, and if you start tinkling with it, you think you need to make sure that you have a good plan, solid plan B. And at this point, the department is sending out a new RFP, learning from all the experiences, putting in all the comments and recommendations from the Office of Finance, from the studies that have been done, from the Office of Controller. And, at this point, I don't know how the city can, I think in the RFP, I believe it's going to have different sections that will be, give us the opportunity to see if there's any opportunities for internal. But I think to answer your specific question, I believe the last time it was looked at was about 2007.
Okay, and Mr. Carets, what I'm going to do, obviously I want you to ask questions and everything else, is I'm going to recommend that we approve this motion as amended to direct the CAO to review and report on the revenue enhancement points and refer it to the Budget and Finance Committee, with both of us sit on. And I would like the SEIU, who I'm sure will listen to this tape, to appreciate the thoroughness of how we're handling this, and maybe they would show up also to the Transportation Committee and further enlarge on their points. But I appreciate their letter for putting things out there, and I certainly appreciate our responses to all of that. Mr. Carets.
Yeah, a few things. One, it was put out there that it might be possible that the street cleaning that we aren't doing because we furloughed people actually is costing us rather than saving us money, because we then aren't writing parking tickets. Have we reviewed that possibility, done an analysis, and figured out whether we're actually saving or losing money by furloughing street cleaning and not ticketing as a follow-up?
We have not done that analysis. We've given that information both to Street Services and I believe the CAO. We've had a major route cancellations in 2010, part of many different reasons. Some of it was the staffing, some of it was the vehicles, some of it was repair of the vehicles, but obviously there is a big revenue impact. So since we don't manage the street cleaning, we haven't done that analysis of what their values of furloughs is, but if maybe part of Councilmember Rosendale's motion is the CAO can work with us and Street Services to see what the numbers are.
So we'll direct that you do all the analysis of all the different pieces of that, and let us know whether we're saving money, whether we're only saving a tiny bit of money but losing a lot of service, or whether indeed we actually are saving money by not hiring these folks.
Yeah.
Clearly, we're not saving money by not having a full complement of people out there writing tickets. The question is, number one, if we hired the full complement of full-time, fully trained people, would we not still be saving money, and how much money? Secondly, if we hired the full complement of people but we paid them less and only trained them to write tickets, or if we hired, as I know we're considering, the full complement of people, train them and pay them only to write at that skill level, just to write tickets, but only hire them part-time. The question is, where are we on those three pieces? If we hired them all full-time, all fully trained for other things, would we still save some money? If we train them to be full-time, but we paid them to be full-time, but we only trained them to write tickets, and actually created, perhaps not just in this little group of filling the 40 or so spots, but maybe beyond that, we actually created a cadre in the department of people that were gradually, as those openings occurred, that only write tickets. Could we not train them and pay them at that level and actually create a fair amount of efficiency, because we would we would have more people available to write the tickets that we need to have them write. Have we looked at all those questions?
Those are all
Do we
great
know where we
questions
are?
that, Councilmember, that I believe the CAO and the mayor's office are, again, looking at those analysis, and they'll be put forth to the council, those decisions.
Again, can we make sure that they looked at all of those angles? Because I'm not sure that they've been directed previously to do so.
Again, you're the author of the motion here, and
Angela Berman, CAO's office. We'll take those notes back and make sure that those are incorporated in our report back.
Thank you. I think those are all my questions.
Okay, and as Mr. Alarcon has joined us, there are 3 members of the 5-member committee, and Mr. Alarcon, we were just saying, after we asked all these questions and went through all this, that we move forward as amended, of course, and get this report back to the Budget and Finance Committee with a lot of our questions that we have just thrown out to be answered in part by that report back to Budget and Finance. And it's that one.
On the, with regard to changing the posted street cleaning signs with no parking signs to maximize citation issuance, I absolutely oppose that. The reason the signs exist is because of the street sweeping, and the public, I believe by law, has access, should have access to the roadway, and to put no parking signs there specifically to generate revenue, I believe, is a violation of the state law.
You can put signs there to limit parking for a particular time when the street cleaners are scheduled to be there, and you can write citations.
No, that's not what this says. Let me read it to you. It says, change posted street cleaning signs with no parking signs to maximize citation issuance. I believe that's a violation of state law.
Well, and again, to clarify.
ours is a no parking. That's what
It's
we.
no parking street cleaning.
Okay.
No parking street cleaning.
Yeah, it's a different section of the code. You're correct.
So you can't, first of all, it's almost like a speed trap. Under the same.
Councilmember, I know you came in, so what's before you is a letter written by the union asking for those things. That's not from a department. There's no department report. This is the first initial hearing where 3 traffic officers came to this board, handed the committee a letter, and we're here before this body just to explain some of these issues.
We have to be very careful. Our goal is to maximize parking enforcement for safety purposes. It cannot be for revenue generation purposes. But you have to have the reason. So I don't know what was in the motion, but I noted that the reason I stated the way I stated is because I see it was listed as one of the questions that Mr. Rosendale asked earlier as well. What would be necessary to change the posted street cleaning signs with no parking signs? But it only looks at the cost relativity. It doesn't look at the legal ramification.
Right, when they finally get the reports, we can look at it then.
Well, first of all,
it's not.
I don't want to eliminate street sweeping. I mean, I thought what we were doing was trying to free up the street sweepers to do their job so we can continue to clean the streets, but at the same time, parking enforcement could enforce, and that we lost $500,000 a month because we didn't enforce because the streets were not being swept. To do it this way, it's, you know, I think it's the wrong way to do it. And so I actually think we should, how about if we direct in the report that we explore, you know, the rehiring of the street sweeping personnel to be able to have the enforcement personnel do what they normally do, but we don't want to. Let me put it to you this way. The last time street sweeping signs were added to the system, was in my district, under my watch, about 15 years ago. It doesn't happen very often. You pull that service away from the community, and you'll have hell to pay. And these traffic enforcement officers know that. That's why they don't enforce it now. Because if they go out to the community, very angry constituency will tell them, why are you giving me a ticket when my streets are not being swept? And I thought that was the issue we were trying to address. So,
Among others, and it is the questions
what are
we
the
put
other?
out.
And that was the primary issue.
What they're going to do is report this back with all of the questions we asked before you came in. That covers that as well, back to the Budget and Finance Committee for further scrutiny once they're able to get those answers going for us. No decision is being made. We're
Are
just
street
taking.
services here?
No, and they're not. We would like them.
No.
They'll be there at Budget and Finance.
Well, they should be here.
Of course they should. I agree.
Yeah, so I think they should be a party to this report.
That's true. We agree.
The worst thing we could do is pit employee against employee.
Right.
We can enhance everybody's opportunities if we work together. But this way is, I appreciate the effort to expand our revenue generating positions in a way that generates public safety, but not if we're, I mean, which streets are we going to eliminate from posting? I mean, none in my district, I guarantee you, because I will stand in front of the guy trying to take the post out and stop him.
I think that's what we were kind of getting at earlier. We were asking questions about what the cost effectiveness is in reinstating all the furloughed people that are not sweeping the streets, and then beginning to ticket again, as opposed to what we're doing now.
One thing we should explore is that we gave a directive to the CAO to preserve revenue-generating positions. And because they are not very surgical in their approach, and they're always doing slash and burn, they didn't get to the secondary level, which is those people who support other people who generate revenue. In this particular case, the CAO didn't add 2 and 2 and come up with 4 because they didn't think the street sweepers are generating revenue, when in fact they are, because we really shouldn't be enforcing the street sweeping ordinance if we are not sweeping the street. That's like the radar issue, where we're not supposed to be giving tickets if we haven't done the radar or the speed study. Same exact scenario. We shouldn't be doing that.
We're not, council member, so
Exactly.
yes, we're not. So I think that's been a subject of other reports where we've given verbally that report just for exactly what you said. Your predecessors and this city would not take that action of the angry constituency where their quality of life, their streets haven't been swept for many reasons. It could be inclement weather, it could be the sweepers down, it could be staffing issues. For all those reasons, we have a communication link where they let us know, and we're not out there. But it has an impact. And I think as a policy maker decision, I mean, that's something you can look at. But as you said, I think I think the reason the department has stuck to that policy is, one, is it's not fair. It's not about just revenue. It's about quality of life, a service that we provide. And so you are right that we are not doing that policy right now.
No, frankly, I think we could be sued by somebody who got cited in an area, but their streets haven't been swept in a month.
Right.
They're supposed to be swept once a week, right?
I believe there's different routes and different schedules, Councilmember.
Well, usually it's every other week, right?
Yeah, every other week.
Every week. So if it's posted every week, and you guys aren't doing every week anywhere.
Again, we work very closely. If they're not sweeping, if the route is canceled, we don't do it.
You're not doing a once a week anywhere, I think.
No, we don't do the street sweeping. That's Bureau of Street Services.
Well, they're not doing it, trust me. And so I think our program is very vulnerable, but if anything, we should be hiring street sweepers so that our traffic officers can do their jobs better.
Yeah. Again, before you walked in, we did say that there were some very challenges in 2010, but the Bureau of Street Services has done a very good job now kind of minimizing their route cancellations and others. So we really are working together, like you said, just to make sure that, one, the service is provided as a byproduct. There will be those that choose to violate, and then therefore the violation revenue is coming into the city. But it's hard, at a time where our officers were furloughed 3.5 hours. We saw that impact, and you're right. If there are groups that interlink, and you have to have more of a global view to see how do these domino pieces affect one another. And I know the CAO is doing that now. It's part of their analysis. They are doing that.
Okay, but I do ask, who's doing the study? DOT?
I believe the motion was directing CAO to come back with the analysis.
With all the questions we threw out. That will go then to Budget and Finance. Let's take a further look at it with the new questions that have been added to it.
Okay, but are we specifically asking them to look at increasing the street sweeper?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so we have the motion, and we'll move forward to Budget and Finance with all of those questions that we asked prior to Mr. Alarcon and Mr. Alarcon's comments that came in as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Item number 1 on the special agenda item, and we happen to have 4 cards for this item. Describe the item.
Special item number 1 is the DOT report relative to the reallocations of Measure R local return funds in the amount of $5.3 million for various bicycle and pedestrian projects.
Okay. Can we hear the cards, or would we like to get more of a report from staff before we get the questions? How about staff real quickly, and then it might help clarify some of the speakers' questions. And then we have Hillary Norton, Pat Hines, and Ryan Wiggins, and Dr. Clyde Williams would be the 4 that would come up in that order.
Ken Husting, LADOT, and I'm
Good afternoon.
I'm joined by Paul Meshkin of the Bikeways Program and Pauline Chan of the Pedestrian Program. What we have before you is additional information on the proposed use of Measure R local returns for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Program. Specifically, we were asked to talk about where would the money actually be spent, and what we've done is we come up with a little bit more detail showing that the funds that would be set aside, the 5% set aside for the bicycle program, would be spent on bike lanes, bicycle-friendly streets, bicycle parking, and racks, as well as share road pavement markings. And in the report, there's a breakdown of the different locations of where the bicycle lanes, friendly streets, and sharrows would be. With regard to the bicycle racks, this is a citywide program that is very demand-based, and so we don't have a specific list, but this is something that goes on citywide and is very fluid. Now, with regard to the pedestrian program, there's proposed use for establishing a safe routes to school study. And what this is more of a strategic way of looking at where to do improvements across the city on a data-based or data-driven basis, so that we can be more competitive when it comes to the city securing grants through such opportunities such as the Safe Routes to Schools, state and federal programs. Also, we are recommending use for pedestrian safety devices. In other words, wherever there's locations where there's high traffic or high pedestrian incidents that weren't funded through another program, whether it be Safe Routes to Schools, Highway Safety Improvement Program, that the city invest the money to go ahead and address these issues at these locations. And finally, to use some of the money for transit stop enhancements, which would be used citywide. And every council office, or every council district, I know has different locations where there are amenities that are in need at a high transit stop. So we would work closely with the council offices, along with the Public Works, to identify those locations and see what can be done at each stop in each district. And with that, I will go ahead and open it up to questions or defer to one of my colleagues if they have something else that they'd like to say.
Well, since our chair has just timely arrived back, I'll let him start with the questions.
Going once, going twice. Hey. Okay. We're on special item number 1. The list in Table 1 of your report is drawn directly from the 5-year implementation plan that Council just approved along with the bike plan, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
So the projects identified are from which year of the implementation plan?
Year 0.
Here you go. And the 5-year implementation plan was developed in consultation with the advocacy community, correct?
Yes, and the council offices.
Okay. And what criteria did you use to develop the 5-year implementation plan?
We used three criteria: location of the bike path within the network, and if it provides network connectivity, proximity with within low-income household areas, and gap closures. And the projects are ranked and scored based on these three categories and placed in the implementation plan.
On the bicycle parking, that's request-driven.
Yes, it is.
If so, if someone wants to see bicycle parking installed outside their business, who do they contact and what's the wait time?
The request can be submitted through our website. There is a request form that they can fill out and submit the form, or they can call Biker's office and request. And the wait time is about 1 to 2 months.
Do you reach out to other local businesses when you receive requests for bicycle racks to assess the need for the whole area?
Yes, we do. We actually walk the neighborhood, check other locations, and if we find suitable locations, we'll contact the business owners, ask them if they are interested to receive bike racks, and if they are, we do mark the location so we can do the whole area in one shot.
Very good. Now, the pedestrians set aside safe routes to school strategic plan. In many ways, we're in the same place with pedestrian planning that we are with bicycle planning 15 years ago. And frankly, that's nowhere. I mean, we're in the process of moving it. So do we have the option to continue on an ad hoc basis, or can we develop a plan? All right. Well, the discussion in this committee, we've emphasized the importance of planning, obviously. As the second largest city in the nation, it's absolutely shameful that we're not more data-driven, but here we are. Now is the time to change that course, and in so doing, we better serve our communities, care for our children of the cities most needed, because more data-driven in our decisions leverage more grant fundings and reintroduce the strategic plan element in the city. It's a no-brainer, frankly. That's why so many advocacy groups have written letters of support. The Green LA Coalition, the Sustainable Streets, the Safe Routes to School National Partnership, and the LACBC. With that, I'd like to bring staff up for this presentation. Here we go. Question 1. The city is eligible for both national and state Safe Routes to School grants funding. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how are decisions currently made on which projects to pursue?
In the recent years, actually DOT has browsed through and focused on data related to uncontrolled crosswalks. And so it is not exactly accurate to say that we have not relied on data. We have, but it's based on a subset of data, based on where the uncontrolled marked crosswalks are located. And in that process, we looked at pedestrian volumes, we looked at collision histories to determine where the needs are. Now, what this proposal does, is to have a more comprehensive look at needs, so that we're not only looking at existing facilities, but to look at collision data in general, even at locations where we don't have existing marked crosswalks, and then also to analyze the needs based on the individual school areas, so that we can submit projects that consist of a comprehensive list of mitigations, so that we can compete better. The tendency for the state and federal grant programs have veered toward favoring proposals that are comprehensive for the individual schools, rather than to fund a whole list of traffic signal devices or pedestrian warning devices. So we're really just aligning ourselves to the rules and policies of those grantors so that we can improve our chances of getting funded.
Yes, smart move. Let me go through the rest of my questions real quick, because I know my colleagues might have some too. But you're right, that's what we have to do. When the grant awards come in, does the city get its expected share of funding, or are we underperforming?
Well, there is no black and white rule as to what the city share should be, but commonly people refer to population, the city's population relative to the state's population, to gauge how well we did. And so we have not been realizing for example, a 10% share of the state statewide funding in either the state or the federal programs under Safe Routes to School.
So that's why we're moving forward with this now, to get ourselves up to date. So with a study, we could actually establish some baseline data and make informed decisions about the improvement that needs to be made. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And not only would we be better applications, but we would likely have fewer, which would reduce staff workload, basically working smarter. That's sort of where we're heading on this.
Absolutely.
Okay. And a data-driven model like this would reintroduce strategic planning to the city and really serve as a model for all of our transportation improvements. Couldn't it be?
Yes, this is definitely the way to go. It brings objectivity and less anecdotal types of projects to this competition.
Right. And then, of course, do other municipalities have a plan like this in place?
The other municipalities?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do a scientific search of all the available methodologies that other cities use, but been brought to my attention that New York City has a very robust program that they started about 6 years ago. And I did some brief search on the web, and I don't think anyone but New York City has a very robust data-driven analysis and methodology for determining their school needs. And as a result, in phase 1 of their project, they've identified the top 135 elementary middle schools in their city as having the greatest needs. They've also prepared individual comprehensive improvement reports for each one so that as funding comes in, they can implement those short-term and long-term measures. They're now embarked on their second phase, identifying the second list of 135 schools.
Great. I mean, you're moving in the right direction. Now, what about staffing concerns? Are those being discussed with the CAO?
Yes, we work closely with the CAO and the CLA on this issue. We have reported in this report that the support can be done either through a consultant study or through using staff resources if they become available. We are leaving that decision for later because we await to see what the budget brings us for next fiscal year.
Yeah, it's a big if here these days. And the cost of the study, how did you arrive at the number?
Well, in two ways, and so the two ways kind of merge together. One is to look at what New York did. For example, in phase 1 of their program, their study cost them $2.5 million. It took them 4 years. They expected it to take 2, but it did take 4. And then we also broke down, we also looked at it from a different way, ground up, and looked at what kind of expertise would be needed, engineering analysis, coordination, GIS data compilation, and so forth. And based upon our analysis of staff time that would be needed, we came up with a comparable number as well.
Thank you for those answers, and I'll be candid about it. I obviously want to move forward with this, so thank God that people voted Measure R and put monies in the coffers for us to move on. I'm saying pursuing this plan, it's just a lobbying comment I'm making, it will help us address the needs of children. It will send a strong message of support and encouragement for active transportation, helps us maximize our resources, makes us more competitive, leveraging more grant funding, focus the city on data-driven process, and very well could help us reduce traffic congestion. So I'm going to recommend, when we're ready for that point, to approve the DOT's recommendations to transfer Measure R funds to make the bike and pedestrian projects happen. So I could turn to my colleagues, or we could take the public comment, whatever colleagues you want to do at this point. You ready for comments?
Public comments.
Okay,
fine.
great. Let's do public comment on that. Staff stay by for any questions that my colleagues might have. I mentioned Hillary Norton used to be dressed in red, and now we got Pat Hines, we got Ryan Wiggins, and we have Dr. Clyde Williams. So come on up, folks. And Hillary got to her seat first, so you're up first, Hillary.
Good morning, or afternoon, council members. It's Hillary Norton, and I am the executive director of Fixing Angelinos Stuck in Traffic, and I'm here to support the plan for safe routes to school, specifically because this is one of the reasons that FAST came and spoke about making sure that our local return money really went to biking and pedestrian programs. In fact, speaking for the children, but also as a parent of elementary school children, it's really important to think about those of us who don't send our kids to local schools, but are sending our kids to private schools and charter schools that don't have school buses. We're making other trips that could be taken out of traffic if we could make sure that our children could get off transit stations and get to their schools. They could get off buses and get to their schools safely. It is such an important program to make sure that clusters of schools, like those near MacArthur Park where we are, or others, where there's fast traffic getting in and out of the city, but also a number of elementary school children, that we can think about how to make these routes easier, better, and I hope that we also start collecting data about how many more transit riders we created, because the walk from the transit station to the school is safer. Because as gas is continuing to climb, it is harder and harder to take our children in a car. We need to start incentivizing transit and using that last mile as a walk for health, for family unity, and to make that a safer experience for all of us. So I thank you very much for your support already, and we just are here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much on that. Pat Hines.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pat Hines. I'm Executive Director and founder of Safe Moves. We're a nonprofit. We've been serving the city of Los Angeles since 1983, teaching bicycle, pedestrian, and transit use to kids. I'm here to support Safe Routes to School. If you can remember back about 30 years ago, 60% of our kids walked and biked to school. This year alone, only 13% of the student population. We have a population of students that are 40 to 50% obese. Many children are being driven to school, and they live within a mile of that school location. SRTS can change the family dynamic to make walking and bicycling a viable way for transportation. City of Los Angeles leads the country in education and some of the things we do to promote bicycle safety and pedestrian safety. Safe Routes to School will put us right on top. And working with families, I've talked to parents a lot in the city of LA, and we ask them, why don't you allow your kids to bike and ride? And the first question, or the first answer they give, is they're afraid of the boogeyman. It's crime.
Right.
And they're afraid that their kids don't know how to walk and ride bicycles safely. If you can accomplish that to show them that their neighborhoods would be safer if their kids are out walking and cycling, we're a much better community. Once you can accomplish that with parents, you have a partner, and you can change the family dynamic where they are walking and biking to school. One of the things I realized working with parents, they would love the free time. That ability to get your kid to school without having to drive would be a real positive in a lot of parents' lives. And kids need that freedom and the sense of responsibility. And what we do today with children can change our adult commuters tomorrow. Because if we can change their habits now, we will not spending all of our money changing behaviors of adults, trying them to get out of the car or showing them that bike and walking is a viable way of transportation. Thank you.
Well, you're very articulate, and I totally agree with everything you've said. We were just talking, Richard and I, about walking to school or home from school when we were kids, and that was pretty much the norm in those days. I can tell you in my...
We did it a lot before.
Yeah, he's a baby here. But, in my neighborhood where I live, the parents have taken a deep interest in their schools, and they now walk their kids to school, or the kids on their own walk or bicycle, because they've created a sense of community around that school for themselves and for their kids. So
I wanted to share this real quick. In your district, we took treadmills out to local schools, and we asked parents and kids, how long would it take you to walk a mile? Parents are saying, it would take me about a half hour. Kids are saying, it'd take us an hour. When they realize how quickly they can walk a mile, it changes their whole view of their ability.
Totally agree, and appreciate that. Ryan Wiggins.
Good afternoon, Ryan Wiggins. I'm with Transportation for America, and I'll come at it from the federal angle since we are a federal transportation advocacy group. As you know, the federal bill is passed every 6 years. In the next round of the bill, we expect a lot more competitive grant programs to come out of it, simply because we expect federal cuts, and we expect the competition for what federal funds are left afterwards to be more and more competitive. As you've probably known, there's the Tiger grants, the Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery grants, Safe Routes to Schools programs. All of these provide the opportunities for regions that go and do data-driven planning, really comprehensive future plans, set long-term goals to have access to increased federal funds. We have supported this. We will continue to support it. That while individual programs like Tiger and Safe Routes to Schools are strategic planning type programs, the overall bill is not yet. And we expect that actually one of the things we can accomplish in this next bill is to be able to have more strategic planning in the overall bill. So that means not just Safe Routes to Schools fund, but also the overall Transportation Enhancement Fund where we get our general bike and pedestrian funding from. So we support these types of plans going forward because regions such as Los Angeles that plan for the future, that have very comprehensive plans to look forward and set goals, are going to be the ones that are successful in getting these federal funds to supplement their state and local funds. One example, the Tiger 2 program in the East Bay, they received $10 million for a bicycle and pedestrian plan. It's going to create 200 jobs. It will also increase connectivity, increase physical activity, improve the public health, and reduce oil dependency. These are the types of things that are going to happen. And just to close, the recent budget proposal in that House proposes to completely eliminate some of these programs. So as local elected leaders, we are really asking you to engage in this process and stand up for these programs going forward. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your articulation, and we see you're from Long Beach.
Yes.
Do you expect the Congress to take any action, this particular Congress, this year?
As you're probably aware, Micah and Boxer were here last week with the transportation hearings. Both Micah and Boxer have basically said that they intend to release their individual draft bills by late spring or early summer, and they are both committed to working towards that. Of course, the political climate will dictate what happens. Also, the President, as part of his budget proposal, released a very large transportation proposal of $556 billion. Obviously, we're not going to get that, but it's a good starting point, has a lot of great programs and proposals in there. And we feel like if we work with our local elected leaders and state leaders and advocacy organizations such as FAST and Safe Routes to Schools, that we can really preserve a lot of the programs that are in our tax, such as the bike and pedestrian funding and other really valuable programs such as transit.
I might add that Congressman Micah, I met with him, as did others, and he is the chair of the committee, and the Republicans have control over the House. And he made it very clear to me that Measure R meant a lot to him. He appreciated Measure R and saw that the funding stream was a valuable and necessary one, and made a personal plea that we get the Green Line into the airport, which was, of course, something I ran on 6 years ago. He said, my wife can't understand why there's no light rail out of LAX. So he's a passionate guy for transportation infrastructure, and I don't think it's a Republican or Democrat ideology on these issues, especially since the people in LA County voted overwhelming for that sales tax, which generates a revenue stream, which he's willing to help expedite that so we can stay on target of doing 12 projects over the next 10 years and not over 30 years. So, and I appreciate your comments and your leadership. Dr. Clyde Williams.
Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno. Sierra Club Transportation Committee is all for this. They were strong supporter for Measure R and such, and focused primarily on trying to get people out of their cars and into transit, also into buses, also into pedestrian walks. However, we need more money for those. Can't we get any money out of other Measure R funds to support pedestrian and bikes? I was quite concerned on the process by which things go into these reports, because the first thing I usually do is I search for neighborhood. And like the call for projects to MTA, this one doesn't even reference the fact that you have 1,800 people meeting each month for neighborhood councils. Nobody really even knew it existed, much like the call for projects. And yeah, we get 2 projects in CD 14. There's active bicyclists there. If you look at the MTA buses, they fill up in El Sereno coming from the San Gabriel Valley. So we have a lot of projects, small ones, large ones, that we would like to propose. When we were told, give us potholes, we gave them potholes. Now we're painting fire hydrants as part of beautification because people like El Sereno. What we'd like to do is make sure that the study that goes forward has an outreach in there, and that it incorporates the neighborhood council system, which is a department of the city. But apparently DOT and Public Works don't really recognize it, and DWP occasionally recognizes this. So I'd like to have the study include neighborhood councils. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and we're going to be losing our quorum in a second, and we're going to continue some of this conversation on the side in full format here, but I recommend we approve the DOTs to transfer Measure R funds to the bike and pedestrian projects.
Second.
Okay. Unanimously approved by the committee. And just real quickly, item number 2, could you read that?
Item number 2 is the CAO and DOT reports relative to the 2010-11 Transportation Grant Fund Annual Work Program.
And basically what I'm recommending is that we approve the CAO recommendations contained in this, and could you give us a quick update on what it is?
Sure. Angela Berman, CAO. Quickly, the report before you shows the necessary administrative and accounting instructions that are necessary to implement the Transportation Grant Fund Annual Work Program. The projects in this program have already been approved by Council. This report just acts as the funding mechanism to apply the matching funds and to also receive the grant funds for the projects.
Any comments, colleagues, or can we move forward with that? So moved, and just because Mr. Alarcon is now here, we put on consent items 1 and 2, which was PPDs, approved, so that's unanimous, all 3. We continued item 3, a report on off-street parking lot 692, and we took action with you present here for item number 5. Item number 4, we also moved forward, and we'd like your support on that one as well. So moved. So unanimous on all those issues. We come back to the discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we've moved all that, but Mr. Alarcon wanted to talk a little bit more about special agenda item 1. So those involved in staff and that, could you come on back up so he can make his comments on that?
You can stay there. Actually, I wanted to address some of the comments that Pat Hines made, and I think she left. I specifically wanted to address them to Pat, but that is that, when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time on my bicycle because my parents were divorced, and when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time on my bicycle because my parents were divorced, and they lived 3 miles apart, and so I used to ride to my father's house and to his businesses on my bike, 3 miles away, dating back to when I was about 10, 11 years old. But what I wanted to state, Ms. Hines isn't here, but I want to just say this. I wouldn't have my kid do what I did 40 years ago. It's just not safe, and we're not ready. In fact, the reason I'm compelled to be an advocate for bicycle paths and everything else related to improving our system of bicycles is because it terrifies me. Just today, I introduced a reward motion for a mother who was killed and 3 kids who were run over by a car. 3 kids with their parental supervision can't get across the street, let alone ride their bikes in the streets of Pacoima. And it's not just Pacoima, it's all over the city. The fact is we have much more congestion. We have to be much more careful. And as a parent of somebody who's 3 years old, I couldn't even imagine asking my kid to ride a bike to school, even though it's just half a mile away. So we have a lot of work to do. We shouldn't suggest to parents to take your kids or get your kids on the bike to go to school until we know that it's safe. And so every parent, what we should be telling parents is to do their own analysis of how safe is it to get to school, and if their particular community has the advantages of having a bicycle-friendly community, then maybe take the suggestion to have their child ride to school. But we should use this as encouragement to do more, because for a lot of reasons, all stated already, we need to wean ourselves away from the car. The fact that we've lowered crime helps. The fact that we're now dedicating 10% of these funds to pedestrians and bicycles. That's a big shift from not so long ago. But we have to do so much more. And when my daughter is 12, I'm hoping that she can ride her bike someplace and not worry about getting hit by a car or being scared off the highway by somebody who doesn't believe they have a place on this place. And even me, who've worked with Safe Moves on a variety of initiatives. Today I was driving in front of City Hall here on Spring, and there was a bicycle in between the double yellow lines in the middle of Spring, and I was wondering whether they were supposed to be there or not, and I couldn't even answer for myself whether or not they should have been there. So we have a lot of work to do, whether it's educating bicyclists, whether it's improving the conditions, whether it's slowing cars down, whether it's improving pedestrian and bicycle access to safe mobility, and connecting all the dots to the various systems. We have a lot of work to do. But I like the report and the various categories of expenditures. They seem to address the direction that this committee encouraged. So thank you very much for doing a good job on it. Thank you.
Well said, Councilmember.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment or comment about anything else? Hearing none. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Hillary, how's it going?
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Subway.